Wow, we're having all
I'm
kinds.
here.
Oh, okay. Threw me off for a second. I'm like, wait a minute. The technology was messing with me today. So, all right. So we have you on, and we're very happy to have you here. For those who do not know, Shannon has been with us on the program about 1 month ago, actually, a month and 2 days, when you first announced your interest in running for the mayoral seat for the city of Baltimore.
Yes,
All right. And since that time, as of June 1st, you made that official. All right.
absolutely. And I really appreciate you having me on.
Well, we're happy to have you on. You're an excellent guest. Now, I know there's a lot of things that people have been talking about in Baltimore. Baltimore has a very unique history as a city because you've had, what, the last five mayors have all had issues where they wound up being removed from office or resigning after one term. Is that right?
That is correct. That is absolutely correct.
So, and I know some of the most recent names have been, of course, Karen Pugh and Stephanie Rawlins Blake and Sheila Dixon. That's going back to 2007. They've all had massive problems and had to resign or not seek election because of a lot of the issues. Can you tell us from the perspective of someone in Baltimore, what have been some of those issues that they've been forced out of office over?
Well, what I can tell you is this. There are always instances where, folks have different interpretations of how things should go. However, in these cases, we have had problems where 2 mayors ago, our mayor was removed or asked to separate herself from the office because of some legal issues. The mayor after that decided not to run for reelection because she had made some inappropriate statements that had gotten picked up and circulated in the media. And now with Mayor Pugh, former Mayor Pugh, um, she's been under investigation. I mean, there were actually a series of raids on her multiple homes and office and city hall by the FBI and the IRS.
Yeah, there have been some serious issues there. As I recall, that was because, and she had the same kind of problem that Sheila Dixon had, because there was questions about finances, embezzlement, or misappropriated funds. With
Yes,
Sheila Rawlings, there was the problem with the actual riots that occurred in Baltimore, where she actually shut down the police to allow the riots to go forward, which kind of ended her term.
it did. It kind of made it a little difficult for her to run again, that's for sure.
Yeah. And I was looking it over, and a lot of people may not be familiar, and just to give them some background on it, Baltimore is actually a very interesting city. If you were to go to the U.S. Census, you'll see that, and I'm trying to bring it up as I'm on the screen, but you have a great city. I mean, it's had enormous growth. There's about 602,000 people in the city. And over the last 10 years, the average income has increased by about 50%. The majority of people, the average age is somewhere around 35 to 45 range. You have a huge 62% of the population are black, which is one of the larger cities for minorities. But on the other side of it, you have the fact that your crime is almost off the charts compared to almost every other city in the nation.
Oh, I wouldn't say almost. We
Well,
we really do have some significant issues with regards to public safety. Um, we've had a higher than normal turnover of those that have been brought in to handle our public safety, and it's a problem that just not hasn't been able to be controlled as of yet.
yeah, and that's one of the things I was noticing, and that's obviously one of the big questions that has to be asked. Since we've seen what happens when riots are left unchecked, when we've seen that many of the Democratic policies have failed in terms of that, where we see a crime rate that's at 70.5%. Well, per 1,000 people, you're looking at a crime rate of 20.47 on violent crime versus 5. This is per 1,000 in the United States. So the 5 for Maryland, 4 in the nation, or a better way to put it, your chance of being a victim of violent crime is 1 in 49 in Baltimore. It's 1 in 200 in Maryland. How would you look to address that?
Well, I think, part of the problem is we have a lot of folks that come in that understand politics and how to legislate, but don't understand what they don't understand, meaning trying to be all things to all people. I think one of the things we have to do is bring in the best people possible and then find out from them what they need to be successful in that job. It would kind of be like me going to the dentist and telling him what he needs to do. I'm not a dentist, but I know if I have a problem with my teeth, I need to find the best dentist possible and let him do his job. And I think when we bring in folks but do not give them the proper resources to be able to do that job, we do them and the city a disservice. So I think there really has to be some open lines of communication so that the officers, the good officers in this city, can actually express freely what they need to be successful, what it will take for them to be able to turn the trends around with regards to crime, and specifically violent crime in the city of Baltimore. I think if we try to tell them, instead of hear from them, they're the ones that are trained to do the job. So I think that's a big part of the solution, is to actually hear what the officers need.
So it's a question of leadership, essentially.
Yes, yes. But then you've got some other issues that kind of feed into it. For example, we need the job numbers to climb, not decrease. We need our schools to get better so that when kids graduate, they have a hope of being able to compete in a global marketplace. There are certain things, certain characteristics of a healthy and thriving and vibrant city you expect to see. And we need to work on those things here in Baltimore City to make Baltimore that bright, thriving city that it can be.
Well, actually, I'm looking at some of the numbers directly from Fred, which is the Fed charts. And people can look this up, and I have it on the screen right now. And it's showing that in April of this year, the unemployment rate in Baltimore is 4.9%, which is higher than the national average. Unemployment is higher than the national average. And obviously, this is a big issue. And while the city has grown, you've had a lot of growth of younger individuals, you've had a higher per capita income grow within the city. Obviously, there's still that gap. How, as mayor, could you possibly look to, or what do you believe may be some of the ways to address that issue?
Well, I think we have to make Baltimore a climate that's a welcoming climate for business, specifically small to medium-sized business. Those are the companies that form the gears of that growth engine. So we have to remove red tape where we can and really give them the resources to be able to function and grow, and the incentives to want to come here to do that, so that we can create jobs that are not just, let's just say jobs that fit the growing trends and markets, so that we know we position our city in the best way possible to be able to grow.
Well, I know a lot of people, obviously you're a conservative, you're a Republican, a lot of people may or may not be aware of that. But one of the mantras, one of the things that many Republicans look at are cutting taxes, small government, things like that. Are there specific issues that you can say, well, here's one tactic that's worked in other cities that I would want to duplicate in Baltimore?
Well, there are some things, there are parts and pieces, like an a la carte menu, that I think I've seen that have worked in other cities that I'd like to try here in Baltimore. But I think in addition to public safety, which is definitely a top priority, the other area where we really need to focus on is education. Over the years, Baltimore has lost its ability to even create a winning education system. At this current state, um, the Board of Election is appointed half by the governor and half by the mayor. So we haven't had um, a Republican in both the mayor and the governor together in a long time. So we have not had a Board of Education that has a unified direction in a long time. So I think addressing education from a standpoint that makes sense would be a great place to start.
Well, education is a huge thing, and obviously, the more educated people are, we've seen historically, it's almost a direct correlation that the more education a person would have, the more likely they are to not commit crimes, to not go to jail, and to be a more productive citizen and have a better quality of life. That's been very consistent. So it sounds like that's one of your key focuses that you would like to look at.
Absolutely. I mean, a good education is almost like a Disney magic wand. When you look at folks that are in lower income brackets, now let me keep this real for a second.
Mm-hmm.
My mom was 19 and single when I was born. Okay,
About
the
like
only
mine.
thing that kept us from where we were and got us to where we are is education. It
Sure.
made the difference. So I know for a fact, from my own personal experience, that education is the only sustainable key to stemming the tide and turning the trends of poverty in our inner cities. And I don't just mean regular old try and push everybody to college kind of education. I mean bringing back trades. I mean recognizing that, as you would say in church, meet people where they are. It's the same thing in school. Give students curriculum and opportunities and advantages that meet their skill sets. So you want to bring back trades. You want to be able to make sure that you prepare students that when they graduate, they really can get a job that will sustain them. So you have to redo the education system if you really want to be able to change the income levels of your students and your citizens and all of that. You got to start there.
No, I can understand that completely. It makes a lot of sense. Uh, because education, I mean, we've seen it how many times over and over again. Education is the key. If we've got
It
the
is.
education, everything else comes from there. Let me ask you, Shannon. There's a lot of talk right now uh, by the major media, the Baltimore Sun in particular, in talking about people like Jack Young, and they've been mentioning names of some other individuals. I believe State Senator Jill Carter, and they're talking about all these people who may be running. How do you think that? What do you bring to this table that separates you from career politicians that the media currently are talking about, which are all Democrats, but that they're focusing on that end? How do you present something different that people should check out?
So here's an interesting thing. I was having a very similar conversation with someone about a week or two ago, and he said to me, he said, "Well, here's the problem with Baltimore. It's kind of like you take the chairs from the ballroom and put them up on the deck. So you move the chairs, but the ship is still sinking. So we need a fresh perspective. We don't need to recycle the same perspective and ideas. We don't need to recycle the same folks that came up from the same school of thought that clearly has not worked."
Well, it definitely hasn't worked. That's true. We've seen that, as I mentioned, just the last three mayors, all of them either resigning or being kicked out of office or not able to run again. We've seen that in the Baltimore riots that have occurred. I mean, these are all facts. It's not a question. So that brings me to ask the question, we know, according to WTOP, I believe that's one of your local organizations, one of the local stations out there, they did a poll
Mm-hmm.
showing that 76%, this was done on May 8th of 2019, and it shows, then the title of it is Maryland poll shows Baltimore's scandal-weary voters are ready for a change. And in that article, they're mentioning that something like 76% of residents expected or were tired of former Mayor Pugh. We're looking for a change there. We're seeing that there's been a big momentum to move away from what's been consistent and common in Baltimore. And based on your contact in speaking with people, and you yourself have done a radio show for many years in the morning with your husband Michael, what do you hear? What have you heard the public saying? This is what we want. This is the direction we want to see that hasn't been said or isn't being said by other officials right now.
So I'm hearing more of this is what we don't want. This is what we don't want to allow to continue. So now that's a start, because when you know what you don't want, okay, you can eliminate that and look for what it is that you do want. I think even if folks aren't sure exactly how to get there, they all understand that our crime numbers are off the charts. That has to be addressed. That our school buildings and the curriculum are not pairing up together to create a world-class education system. We kind of get that. We don't see the resources in the city that are just spurring and encouraging off-the-chart business growth and development. We know that there are things that, when we look at other cities, they have and we don't. But now folks don't always understand how to get those things. And that's what the new leadership under my administration will show the city. How to be able to become what they see out there and want to be here.
Well, that's an important thing. Let me ask you. I know that you had your launch party on June 1st.
Yes.
I'm imagining, and I haven't had a chance to speak to the Maryland Republican Party, but I imagine they've been very supportive and they were there at the event. How was that event? Were you able to raise money? And how has the response been from other Republicans throughout the state?
So it was very well attended. There were several organizations represented. There's nothing I would have changed about the kickoff. So yes, we are in that fundraising phase, and we will be there for a while because, you can have the best ideas, dreams, visions, and goals, but if you don't have the dollars that go with it to get your message to the voters, it's kind of a moot point. So the state party has been very, very supportive and receptive. Our state party chair actually made the announcement for me.
Oh, that's cool.
Which was kind of a funny thing. I was home and I got a text that said, "Here, check out this link." And it was of an interview of our state party chair talking about Baltimore and what he hoped would happen in the city, and who he hoped would actually run for mayor. And this was not a conversation that he and I had had. So that was an interesting kind of thing there.
Oh, that is. That's really cool. So let me ask you this, based on that, because I was just talking in the early part of the show, and I was discussing Joe Biden. And I'm sure you're familiar with Joe Biden.
Of course.
And he mentioned, and we showed video, but he also mentioned this in interviews recently, that when he started off, he was willing and tried to sell himself to special interest groups to raise money so that he could be elected, which I find troubling, which I find very troubling. And his exact words were he was trying to prostitute himself to get the money to run in an election. And I believe that's very troubling, especially since in the last 3 years, he's gone from $1 million in debt to $1 million in profit. That's about $2 million. That's troubling without a job. So I would ask, and I think this is, and especially given the environment in Baltimore with some of the past mayors, and their money issues, it needs to be asked. Would you do the same thing as what Biden did?
So our strategy is completely different. I gauge the support in this city for my candidacy and campaign by the amount of individuals that pledge to support and then actually do support the campaign. So for me, I'm not I'm not looking to be beholden. See, that's where you get into trouble.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I want the individual voters to decide they want to support my campaign, either by volunteering or by donating 10, 15, $20 a month. That's how I know I'm hitting the mark. That's how I know that my campaign is being well received by the folks that matter, which are the voters, the people that live here, not the special interests.
Yeah, that makes a big difference because, and that's obviously very different than, as I said, this is from Joe Biden himself. We covered that earlier in the program. That's what he was coming from. He was looking to have special interest by him. So it's always refreshing to hear someone say, who's involved in politics, to say, no, I don't want to be, I'm not up for sale. I don't want to be bought. I want to represent the people. Because we just don't hear that enough. We really don't. I got to tell you that.
Well, if you're elected to serve the people, you need to hear the people. And
I,
you need to be able to gauge that they hear you as well.
no, I agree with that. I think that's absolutely important. But we just don't hear it enough. And I'm glad and I'm happy to be able to get that answer from you because I don't think enough organizations mention it. And speaking of that, obviously you're going to be out on the campaign trail. You're going to be out with the public talking with them.
Yes.
What are some of the next events that people can be able to contact you or to see you or to speak with you?
Well, first of all, I'm really pretty accessible, especially on social media. So folks don't have to wait for an event or a special thing to be able to reach out to me. People can reach out to me on Facebook at Wright for Baltimore. They can message me, and I do respond to all of my messages.
That's always
So
important. So that's
I
the
don't,
easiest way to
I don't
reach you.
expect people to just wait for a special event or occasion. They can reach out to me.
That's cool. That's always important to have that contact. I don't think that's one of the great things about social media nowadays is that you can get that direct response from people. But do you have an event that you have planned?
We actually have several. Um, we are, matter of fact, June 15th, we are participating in a Juneteenth tour of Maryland with Dr. Alveda King.
Ooh,
So we will be starting in Baltimore in the morning, going up to Bel Air, Maryland in the afternoon, and ending in Annapolis in the evening.
wow.
So there will be three different events, and one specifically in Baltimore, as I said, starts at 11 a.m. And as I said, also this is for Juneteenth celebration. So that's one place. And there are, matter of fact, this afternoon, our calendar page will be going up so that people can see what events are coming up and where, and join us if they'd like.
Oh, great. And they can find that both on the website and on social media?
Yes.
Fantastic. And people will be able to see that. By the way, people, remember it's WRIGHT. When you're putting in right, it's WRIGHT. Just as a reminder for those who are listening to this on an audio only basis. I wanted to ask, and I just had it in my mind and then I threw myself off there. Alveda King, Dr. Alveda King. She's been a supporter of yours for a while. And it's interesting. She's backing you and she's still there with you even now. Is that correct? Am I?
Well, I met Dr. Alveda King in 2013. Um, and we've stayed in communication somewhat since. The last time I saw her, though, I must admit, it's been a couple of years. I saw her last during the inaugural festivities in January of 2017.
No, but she's still in touch and she's still willing to work with you. That says something.
Well, see, the interesting thing that I don't know if a lot of folks know about Dr. Alveda is, although she does have an assistant that handles most of her issues and things, she actually responds to her own Facebook messages.
Oh,
So I can send her a message and get a messenger message back from her within a day.
wow. That
And
is
she actually responds to her messages herself.
that's rare. That is very rare. I can't even say that I do that all the time. Let me ask you, and now we've covered a lot of ground. We've talked about the troubles in Baltimore in terms of economics, in terms of education, in terms of crime. We've talked about some of the solutions and the path that you're looking to go forward with to resolve that, and how people can reach you at Right for Baltimore. Let me ask, is there, and just in the final moments here, is there anything that I haven't addressed? Something that you, obviously, it's a new campaign. I know the mainstream media hasn't caught on yet, but they will, and we're going to help them by giving them this and say, they should put this out there. But is there anything else that you would say you want people to know who are looking at what alternative, what's the right way for Baltimore?
Well, because we're wrapping it up, there are a couple of things that I'd like to say. First of all, for any of your listeners that are interested, that actually live in Baltimore or are interested in supporting our campaign, please do reach out for me on Facebook at Right for Maryland, Right for Baltimore, I'm sorry, or on my website, which is rightformaryland.com. If you have questions, if you have suggestions or thoughts, share them. You will always get a response, always. Our calendar will be there. If there are events going on in your community that you want us to come to, message us, let us know that as well. This campaign is not just to win the office of mayor. This campaign is to give people a snapshot of what a Right for Mayor administration would be like. That we're open, responsive, and receptive. And I think those are things that people need to see, feel, and understand.
Oh,
That's number one.
mm-hmm.
I am very happy to be participating in the Juneteenth celebrations with Dr. Alveda King, but I have to say that in itself was a group effort. And one of the folks that was behind that effort was our Republican National Committee woman, Nicolay Ambrose. And it's being held here in Baltimore. And there are folks, and one of the things I like about Nicolay is all of the folks and the speakers represent diverse backgrounds and experience. In Baltimore right now, to turn the city around, it's really got to be about the policies and how they affect the people and what's best for the people and the families in this city. So I'd like to actually thank Nicolay and Reverend Dean Nelson and Dr. Alveda King for putting Baltimore on their radar. That had nothing to do with me. I will be there, but I want to thank the folks that have reached out and said, we're not going to let Baltimore, fall off the map. We're not going to let that happen. Dr. King's event here in Baltimore City is being put on by the National Center for Women Entrepreneurship, and it's going to be held at Morgan State. And the support that the city of Baltimore is getting is kind of awesome. And I believe that with all of the voters working together and reaching out, we can turn this city around.
Oh, I absolutely believe that that's possible. I never give up. Always fight. Always fight the good fight for the good causes. And obviously, just like WTOP had mentioned, Baltimore is ready for a change. That's what the people have been saying. So they're ready for the right path for Baltimore, I believe. And so I think this you have that opportunity. I want to have you back on. I definitely would love to speak to Alveda King. I know that Reverend Dean Nelson, I've spoken with him before, great individual. Mm-hmm. We've done interviews with him, and he's been doing some great work down in North Carolina. And obviously, you've surrounded yourself with a very strong, powerful group of individuals. I think he's with the Frederick Douglass Institute.
Yes.
So it's really a great crowd of people. So I'm looking forward to seeing more about this. We're going to obviously be following up. We've already done that once. We're going to continue to do that as the campaign goes forward. It's obviously in the early stages for a 2020 race, but never too early to get out there.
Absolutely.
So what we'll do is we'll definitely try and get back in touch with you maybe a little bit later in the summer and
That
follow
would be
up.
great. I
And
would I would love that. Thank you.
all right. And folks, again, we'll have in the description links to all the sites, and you'll be able to check that out. We're a little over time, so we have to go, but it's worth it for a great interview. And I again thank our guest, Shannon Wright, for being here with us and her describing and telling us about her efforts with the Baltimore mayoral race. And folks, we look forward to seeing you on Thursday at 1 p.m. or on Saturday at 12 noon right here on No Soundbites Allowed. I'll talk to you again soon.